After a lifetime of researching the dynamic and enigmatic world of light entertainment, I've decided to ditch my notebook and meet the people who inspire me. What makes them the people they are? How do they feel about the show business landscape in which they find themselves? And in a world where anyone can be a star, is there still a need for performers who have universal appeal? Come with me on a journey of discovery as I get a unique insight into Britain's favourite stars with a little help from my glamorous assistants. Yeah, well, I say glamorous, more like hazardous. And of course, we'll have a bit of fun along the way.
Bristolian stand-up comic Johnny Ball swapped life on the circuit for children's TV in 1964 when he became a presenter on the BBC's flagship series Play School, at the same time as writing gags for rival children's series Crackerjack. By the late 1970s, Johnny was a household name, and his 1978 series Think of a Number cemented this. I caught up with the TV icon to talk comedy, children's TV and recollections on an unparalleled career in entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Johnny Ball.
So, appearing on the Northern Comedy Circuit during the early 1960s alongside icons such as Les Dawson, what sort of grounding in entertainment did that offer you?
It was just fabulous grounding. Les and I differed in that Les was always this melancholic, grumpy figure, and it didn't go down very well in the clubs, where I was a person who clearly loved the audience and loved to have fun with the audience. I've been a butler in Redcoat for 3 years, so I was used to communicating with people and bringing them along with me, so the fun was like a party, really. So I found it much easier in the clubs than Les did. However, once we got on television, Les just shot away because he was perfect with television. And I never made it in television because I didn't want to do the club acts that I did. That was for the clubs. That was for the audience in front of me. When you got a national audience, I wanted to do different things, and my act didn't suit that.
So why then did you sort of stray from that sort of style of comedy eventually?
I got into children's television in 1967, the same year that I did the Valdoonican show and an ITV Christmas Night Spectacular, which was an hour and a half show, and I compared that, but neither of them made a name for me. No, I might have not appeared. I didn't break any pots at all, but I got into children's television, and I suddenly found that I loved the integrity of the children's television, and after I'd done it for a few weeks, I began to like it more, and I realized that with children's television, I could learn television and turn myself into something that did suit television, and I didn't know what that was. But I suddenly realized that this was my career path, and the clubs had just got me to that stage, and I wasn't really going to do much longer in the clubs.
Okay. So, are you talking about the BBC's Play School there, where you talk about your movie?
That's right, Play School first, and then it was only a passing thing. I only did Play School for 16 years. But after about 3 years, I started writing my own shows. I wrote a series called Cabbages and Kings, which was a bit like Horrible Histories today, in many ways. And it was okay, but we didn't have the budget for it. It was costing too much, so it wasn't viable. So after 10 years, or 9 years, I think it was, I did Think of a Number.
Yeah.
And that became a great success. So my whole career changed path then.
So just wanted to know how it sort of felt moving from the world of comedy into children's television, and sort of how far removed it was from what you was kind of used to doing, and then into something which you obviously enjoyed so much.
Yeah. When I was in the clubs, I loved working to the audience, and I loved looking at the audience and laughing with them and getting them to laugh with me, and it was really, really beautiful. I loved it. I envy the comedians today who have huge audiences. The most I ever got was about 700 in a big club, and that was wonderful. But now they get thousands, and it must be marvelous to get that rapport with an audience. But I found that talking to the TV camera was equally rewarding and I just poured myself through the camera, as it were,
Yeah.
and I just loved it. I just loved the camera and loved working with it. And I did things like I went to a seminar where they were talking about special effects, effects like, you know, the same person appearing next to each other, talking to each other, people coming through through screens as though they're walking through doors, and all those kind of special effects. And I shouldn't have been there because I wasn't an employee of the BBC. I was freelance. But I went in, and within 2 years, I used every single one of those tricks in my programs, much more than all the directors in the BBC had used. And because I love the medium of television, I love using it.
Yeah. So, Josh has asked about Floella Benjamin and what it was like working with her, and why do you think you developed such a good on-screen chemistry? I
loved Play School, and they found that I was very, I don't know, actors tend to think of themselves a lot, and I wasn't an actor. So actors tend to not share with other presenters as much until they get used to it and get into it. They're almost plowing their own furrow. But I loved people, and they realized that. And so I got the job of doing the first week with almost every new girl presenter. And it was absolutely lovely, and I enjoyed it tremendously. And Floella had just done the Black Mikado in the West End, where she'd been a tremendous success, as had Derek Griffiths. We were in London in a restaurant, and two Americans came in and said, we've just seen an absolute genius, the funniest man we've ever seen, and that was Derek Griffiths. So they were both very successful. So when they came into Play School, it was almost a step down. But I helped Floella from the start. I taught her how to stand up, because she would stand up too quickly. I said, no, you've got to look at camera and stand up and let the camera come up with you. And she always mentions that.
Yeah. So you mentioned before there about think of a number.
Yeah.
What sort of responsibility did you feel like you had when you had your own sort of children?
Tremendous. Tremendous. It was, right, I wrote the first one, and the pilot was a success. I wrote the first series, and we won BAFTA with that series. But then people started writing, kids started writing, saying, I'm going to be a scientist, I'm going to be a structural engineer, I'm going to be this and that because of you. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up on end because I had to write these scripts. And now I realize the responsibility. And it really was daunting. It really, really was very tough. And I found it much tougher to write once I got this idea that I was actually changing people's lives. So I took it very seriously indeed, you know, and found that there was nothing I couldn't talk about. So I said to the producer one day, I'm going to do a program on explosives. And he said, you can't do that. I said, why? He said, it's children's television. I'm not allowing that. I said, no, it's called Bang, Bang, Bang. And he said, no, I'm not allowing it. I said, well, what does a car engine do when it's doing 3,000 revs?
Yeah.
It's producing 6,000 bangs, 6,000 controlled explosions a minute, or a second, whatever it is, a minute, you know. And he said, oh, I see controlled explosion. Oh, that's all right. I said, I want to talk about Hiroshima. And he said, what? So I said, well, wait till you see the script. So he saw the script and he said, okay, you know. Yeah. And so I took these challenges on and tried very carefully to be a good example to people, you know, and be positive all the time. I was never negative.
Yeah, excellent. Just asked, do you think you would be able to get away with some of that now?
I was told a couple of years ago that the BBC said, oh, your programmes couldn't be made today. When if you remember Fred Dibner, when Fred Dibner died, the producer of Fred Dibner, who'd done all those wonderful programmes with enormous figures, very, very popular, the producer knew me, and he said, you know, Fred's terminally ill and he's dying. And he said, would you consider doing a new series in that slot that's different totally different, but I think you could do a similar thing. And I said, I'd love to. And after that, been 25 years at the BBC, that happened, I think, in 2004, and the BBC wouldn't even grant a producer a meeting to discuss it.
Yeah.
So what I'd done, I don't know, but no, they weren't interested. So that was very odd.
Okay, that leads quite nicely to our next question. How important do you think the BBC Television Centre was to the output of British television during the period?
It was, the BBC was the greatest television company in the world, there's no question. And in terms of children's output, we far outstripped any other country in the world, anyone at all. When you had me and Tony Hart and Johnny Morris and Blue Peter and all those programs, Vision On and all those programs, we did so well that ITV stopped importing American cartoons because it wasn't viable, because there weren't getting enough people watching them.
Yeah.
Sadly, all that's gone today, and I think it's terribly sad. I really do. And I think it was lovely when children's television started about 4 o'clock and they went through to 5 and then suddenly went through to the news and then the evening programs. And it was all seamless and the whole family could watch without anybody worrying about anybody being shocked or frightened or, having terrible material thrown at them. Today, the stuff in the soaps, I think, is just horrible all the time. And it's such a bad influence. And so I'm an old grouch about it, I'm afraid. I just think the golden age of BBC television, I think, has gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah. But,
I hope I'm wrong there. I do hope the BBC is successful in the future and continues to be successful. I don't wish them harm at all.
Well, of course, the next question leads on to another generation in the Ball dynasty. What was your initial reaction to when Zoe had expressed an interest in being a broadcaster?
She said she wanted to do journalism, and I knew what she meant. I knew she meant she wanted to be in television, and it was okay. And she left school at 18. She hadn't particularly academic. So, and she came out at 18, and I gave her one phone number, which I got from my agent, which was for the Saturday morning children's programs for ITV out of Granada. And she rang. Oh, no, she rang the BBC. And they said, no, we haven't got any room because we're using the same crew as last year. Ring Granada, because they start at the same time as us. So she rang Granada, and they said, no, we haven't got any place. And they said, oh, hang on. B-Sky B are doing a thing, and they're doing Saturday and Sunday. Ring them. So she rang them, and they gave her a job at literally no money.
Yeah.
But she took the job at 18, and we paid her digs in Manchester, and she went up there for a few years, and slowly she started to make money, and that's where she started. And there was a weird thing where she had 3 friends, and the 4 girls were really dynamic, and there were 3 jobs going at Granada after the children's series had finished, and it came up with 3 jobs, and the other 3 girls got the jobs, and Zoe didn't. And Zoe was ever so upset, and the boss of Granada Television said, what are you worried about, Zoe? You're going to be a bloody star. And they could see that she was going to make it.
Yeah.
It's the first thing that Chris Evans said when he saw her. He said she's going to be a star.
Yeah. Lovely.
So it was lovely, and it's funny, you see, because she hasn't done it through me. It wasn't. She didn't come onto my programs or anything like that. It wasn't like that. She plowed her own furrow. She was a ladette, as people remember, for a few years, and I didn't know what her life was all about. So she did it on her own, and I'm very proud of her. Really, very proud of her.
Excellent. Slightly more recently then, well, I say slightly, ever so slightly more recently, 2003, you appeared alongside the great Terry Wogan at answering viewers' questions on Channel 5's Terry and Gabby show.
Yeah.
What were your memories of working on that show and working with Sir Terry Wogan?
Terry was a joy, and I'd known him before, and he was a great joy. He was a great broadcaster, you know. I mean, Zoe works from Wogan House now.
Yeah.
Radio 2 works from Wogan House. It's named after him. He was tremendous. I have to be honest with the Terry and Gabby show, is he was heading for retirement, and he was persuaded by Chris Evans to do it, and he didn't really want to do it.
Right.
And he said, go on, I'll do it then. But he didn't work hard at it, and the show didn't do very well. And it was a pity, because I was with Terry, as I say, just at the time when he was saying, oh, I've had so many years now and so much, you know, I want to ease out now. So it was, if you like, I was working in the wrong time in his career.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't realize that he wasn't fully fit, because he was only a few years later that he died. And I didn't realize at all that he had health problems at all.
Yeah. So we'll sort of talk about other people's great careers, and we'll go back to yours. Looking back at your career, what would you say your proudest achievement is?
The proudest thing was writing the Think programs. It was just, I was totally in my element. And you see, I left school at 16. I didn't go to university. I didn't even go to sixth form. So I had to research all the programs. If I'd gone to university, I'd have been perhaps an engineer, perhaps a biologist. I'd have had one corridor of learning. But because I didn't go, my education was messed up terribly, but it didn't matter. Because as soon as I left, I realized I was really, you know, quite intelligent and was working well, and turned almost everything I did into a success of some kind. So I had a lot of confidence, but I had no discipline.
Yeah.
No single discipline. I now realize it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I researched and talked about all kinds of things. I love history. I love the history of science, but I love the history of politics. I love everything about history. You know, my latest book is the history of maths. You know, which is my real love. You know, so I've loved researching, and I've found, because I've been a comedian, and stand-up comedians have to learn to get their effect across quickly.
Yeah.
The joke has to be very concise and quick, no wagging around. You've got to get on with it, bang, and hit them. And that's the joke. It's got to be quick. My writing became the same way. I couldn't write dead lines. Everything had to be important. And I put so many ideas into every program that they would have been 45 minutes. So rather than cut ideas out, we condensed them so that the ideas were really sharp and precise and clear. And that was the other advantage we had in my writing the programs. So it was a wonderful, wonderful period. But it still goes on. I still do things like that now.
Yeah. So what's next? What's next for Johnny Ball? You got anything in the pipeline, or?
There's a few things. Right. People like me, people who've been around a long time, are used often as celebrities for things. So I'm doing a thing in Italy. It's only a couple of days on holidays, and the holiday they're sending me on is singles holidays, but it's single holidays for people who are interested in the history of places. So we're going to Pisa and then to Siena. That's my 2 days. But I know quite a lot of the history of Pisa with Galileo.
Yeah.
And the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So I'll enjoy that, and that's one thing. And there's mooted a series about being on canals. There have been a good few series of people on canals, but this one is about being on the canal and talking specifically about the history of the canal, how they were made, how it all happened. And that looks like happening. So I'm chuffed to death that people are still ringing me and asking me to do things.
Yeah. Love it. And also you got your book, you mentioned there, the history of mathematics.
Yeah, Wonders Beyond Numbers, yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, all right, well, that's all the questions that Josh has written.
Are you happy, Josh?
A big thank you to our guest for being the subject of another Beyond the Title interview. If you like this, why not browse the website and see if there's anything else that takes your fancy. Don't forget to like our Facebook page to receive updates of forthcoming interviews and to see more information about me and what I do. Thanks again, and hopefully see you next time for another Beyond the Title interview.